Let's try to solve this one. It's getting harder and harder. What can we see? Black is a pawn up, but the pawn on e6 is very strong. Really very strong. It's just 2 moves from the promotion. There is one more tricky idea. Let's say if it was white to move. Queen d7, queen takes d7, e takes d7. What will you do after bishop f6? Bishop d4! Distracting this bishop from protecting a very important d8 square, and white is winning. So queen d7 is something like a very annoying threat. And what can we do? It's black to move. Since it's black to move, there is a possibility to try to attack first. Rook e2 definitely makes sense. Attacking the bishop, attacking the rook. What can white do after rook e2? I may still ask you what will happen if white goes queen d7. Defending the queen, if queen d7, then we take the rook for free, but with rook c2 we are only attacking the rook, and then the rook will move somewhere. We will not get too much out of it. Rook e2, queen d7, queen g8. If the pawn goes to e7, we don't take this rook because there will be e8 promoting, but we take this bishop and there will be no e8. I think it's a brilliant idea. So rook e2, we are attacking 2 pieces. But what's happening after rook c1? I saw it immediately, that's why I forgot to show it. But it's a very important line because after rook c1, white is attacking this queen. And it was very important that after rook c1, we take this rook. We give the queen. Why? Because after bishop takes c1, we have rook e1 with a checkmate. Checkmate is stronger. I think rook e2 is a good move. Rook e2 is the best. Maybe we are right. Rook e2. Queen d7, you see, I expected rook c1. I thought they would ask us what to do after rook c1, and then we will have this beautiful mate. But chess.com decided to ask us what to do after queen d7. I think we have to think, because once again we have a new position, so we can think what to do once again. We were calculating queen g8, but do we have any other moves? If we trade the queens, what's happening? I think it's bad, because the only move which doesn't allow promoting is bishop f6, but as we saw from the previous line, white can still play bishop d4, and this is a big problem. If bishop d4, then d8. Queen c6, there is a problem. There is a problem with this move. If we go queen c6, there is queen d8 check, and bishop f8 is the only move. Queen f8 will be a checkmate. Queen f8, we don't try either, because after queen f8, there is e7, attacking the queen. If the queen moves, there is e8 queen. I don't like it. But the move I really like is queen g8, because after queen g8, there are no checks. If e7, we have a rook e3. Let's try to play queen g8. I really like it. Rook f1. What do they want from us? Let's just take this bishop. There is no reason not to take it. But once again, let's try to look at the position. No, I don't think there is anything. Let's just take it. That's it. Here is the position. Not so many pieces. Must be not that very difficult, but maybe not a very simple one. White has a bishop, black has 2 pawns. First of all, we have to realize in which direction the pawns are moving, and they are moving this direction. What do we see? The bishop on e4, this bishop, it's covering this square. So we can't play g2 because the bishop will simply take the pawn on g2. If we try to move the king closer to the pawns, then this king will run and attack these pawns, and that's why I don't like it. So let's say if we play king h6, king f7, king g5, I believe king e6, king f4, the bishop will move somewhere, perhaps to h1, and how to improve the position. Not so easy. If we go f5 then I believe a very strong move, king f6, taking an eye on this f5 pawn, so the king can't go to e3 because this pawn will be taken. And if the king goes to g4, then we play king e5, f4, king e4, and if f3, the bishop will take on f3. A little bit complicated line, but it's a long one. I tried to go slowly, move by move, and I hope you understood it. I'll explain once again why king f6 was an important move. Let's try to calculate the same line from the very beginning. King h6, king f7, attacking this pawn. King g5, trying to push and trying to go forward with the king. We go king e6. King f4, bishop h1, f5, and let's say we play king d5, trying to bring the king to f1, then black goes king e3, and if we go, let's say, king e5 or king c4, doesn't matter, then this pawn starts running. So we needed not to allow this king e3 by going king f6, not to d5, but to f6. Do we have some other options? Why do we play f5? If the bishop takes, then we play g2 and g1. This bishop doesn't control the important g2 square. So if you play f5, the bishop has to move somewhere. The bishop can move anywhere on this diagonal. And what do we do after that? Let's say to g2. It actually doesn't matter, but let's imagine bishop g2. I believe king f6 is a very important move because we don't allow this king to come and to attack these pawns and not to allow and to stop them moving. That's why I really like king f6, not allowing king e7. If the king goes to d7, then we move our pawns. No, we go king e5, blocking the king from there. And if the king goes to c6, then we are on time to play king d4, king e3, and then bring f4 and f3. I believe this is the way we should do. f5, let's say bishop g2, king g6. Does it work? No, because we play king e7, king g5, king e6, if f4, king e5, king g4, and white is just in time to play king e4 and not allowing f3. So let's try to play f5. The bishop moves to h1, h1 or g2, it's more or less the same, and I believe king f6 is a very important move, not allowing king e7. Let's try to make it. Now let's calculate once again. If we start with f4, what's happening? King goes here, king goes here, king goes here, king g4, threatening f3, but once again there is this annoying king e4, and this is the problem. So king e5 is blocking the queen again. That's why I think starting from f4 is a big mistake. King e5, body check, not allowing king d6. Let's try to make it. King e7 now. What do we do now? Let's start calculating here. Basically f4, king f4, and king d4. These three, the most logical and the only moves. What's happening if the king goes to f4 or d4? If the king goes to f4, after king f6, we are just in the same line we had before. I hope you remember it. King f4, king f6, king g4. Good idea. f4 and f3. But what's happening? White is going king e5, f4, and king e4. We don't like it. Let's try to calculate another line. What's happening if black goes king d4? The idea is king e3, f4, f3. As easy as that. But king d4, what's happening? White is playing king e6 or king f6, it's the same. Then king e3 can't be played because this pawn is under the attack. But after f4, there is one important move. White goes king f5, king e3, and here the very important move, king g4, blocking this square. There is no f3 anymore. Once again, just in time. f4 is a very good move because we are winning important tempo. We will play king d4 and king e3 anyway, but white doesn't have this important move king f6. If there was after f4, if there was just if one important word, if after f4 white could play king f6, king d4, king f5, king e3, king g4, and they would be able to catch this pawn. But they don't have this move. After f4 is if they play king f7, we go king f4, king g6, king e3, and if king f5 or king g5, we already play f3 and we are winning. That's why it was very important. It's very important to start with the f4, not allowing white's king to come closer. Let's try f4 and look if chess.com agrees with us. Yes, it is. Now, king d4, king g6, king e3, king f5, king is on f5, not on g4, and we have f3. Great. King g4, and now the last move, of course, g2, not f2, because bishop g2, and then white takes this pawn, and it's a draw. Now, king f2, because white will take this pawn. That's why g2, take, and that's it. Here we are. Looks a bit scary for black, because the king on a7 doesn't feel safe at all. Black is a pawn up, but white has so many threats that I don't want even to calculate, because almost any move is winning for white if it was white to move. But it's black to move. What can black do? The most logical one, and the only one, looks like playing rook b6, because if we don't play rook b6, we may resign. So we have the position where we have the only move, and if we don't play it, we can resign. So let's try to play rook b6. Sometimes if you are playing the game and you don't know what to do, but you have, let's say you don't know what to do, for example, after rook b6 and c7, or rook b6, rook b3, or rook b6 and any move for black. First play rook b6, wait for your opponent's move, and then think. Don't waste your time, because after rook b6 there are maybe many possibilities. So let's play rook b6 first and ask what do they want for us. They want to know the answer, what do we do after rook b3? The problem is that this rook is under the attack now, and queen b6, king a8, and there are so many mates. There is queen a6 mate, there is queen b7 mate. I don't like it at all. I think nobody likes it. We have to find a way to defend this poor rook on b6, and there are a few ways, yes. Let's calculate. So basically queen c1, we can give this queen. After queen c1, if queen takes back, then we take on b3. Okay, we didn't get a mate, that's true. But even after queen c5, then followed by e takes d5, it looks not so good, in my opinion. If we start with the first move, rook e to b8, then I think it's a big problem after c7. That's why queen d8 I like more, because after c7 we can play queen f6 or queen d6. Anyway, once again, let's look at this position. We already mentioned all the possible defensive moves for black, and they are, once again, rook b8, queen d8, or queen c1 also makes sense. Queen c1 I don't like. Queen c1, queen takes c1, rook b3. Let's say queen c5 check, then e takes d5, and these pawns will be running. I'll show this line. Queen c1, rook b3. Let's say queen c5 check back. The king goes somewhere, or rook b6 back, then e takes d5, this. No, right? No. If rook b8, the first move, then c7. And I don't know what to do. The rook is under the attack. If the rook moves, then white promotes. I don't like the other moves. And maybe after queen d8, maybe white will take on d5. Maybe white will play c7. I don't know what they will do, but let's play queen d8 first and ask what do they want from us. And after queen d8, c7, we see that we are not losing, at least not immediately, because we have this option, we have this option. We have many options. Let's try queen d8. Let's try queen d8. E takes d5. They want to know the answer for e takes d5. After e takes d5, I don't think white is threatening c7, because after c7, we can still play queen d6 or queen f6, and the rook will be well protected. I believe that the threat is to play d6, then d7, and then c7. Maybe I am wrong, but I believe d6 is the threat. So what can we do now? Yes, queen c7. Queen c7 seems fine. e4. I really like queen c7. Why? Because after queen c7, if white goes d6, we take this pawn. If queen takes on c6, there is no pin anymore, so we can take back with the rook. And I think we are great. Queen c7 is good, but let's try to think about other possibilities. Let's calculate e4. Then what's happening? I am a bit worried about d6. Let's say e3, trying to move this pawn. d7, attacking the rook. If e2, we take the rook. Queen takes, we take the rook on b6. Not good. If e4, d6, e3, d7, the rook moves somewhere. Let's say here, then c7, attacking the queen. If queen goes to f6, somehow defending, then these both pawns are already here. White can play queen takes b6. After queen f6, there was the threat of the mate on f2 or an f1. So I want to trade these pieces, and then one of the pawn promotes. That's why I don't like e4. White is threatening d6, so why to allow this if we have a pretty move queen c7? Let's play queen c7. Let's try. Queen c7, it was good. New position. We already solved 50 puzzles. I think we are doing great. I'll show this position. So, rook b6, rook b3, queen d8, e takes d5, e4, d6, e3, d7, rook e6, c7. No, that's bad for black. Let's take a look at this position. I really like it for black. Materially, black is an exchange down, but we have a very strong dark squared bishop. And there are these weaknesses on f4 and h4. And in general, the king is weak. And when there are opposite colored bishops, it's very important to have a safe king. And despite being an exchange down, it's still looking very good for black. There are plenty of possibilities. There is a possibility to take on f4. It's one possibility. Another possibility is knight g4. Very interesting one. There is also a possibility to go knight h5, threatening knight g3. But before calculating all these possibilities, let's try to think what's white's threat. It's very good because white doesn't really have a threat. I thought they might want to play a rook h3 with a little trap so that after queen f4 there is rook f3, attacking the queen and the knight. But the problem is that this doesn't work because queen h2 will be the mate. So this is not a threat. What white may want to do is to bring another rook into the play, attacking the queen, and then okay, we give this pawn, but maybe you don't give it. So after rook e1, queen f4, queen takes f4, bishop f4, rook f2. Once again, attacking these two pieces, but there is a tricky move, bishop g3. And if rook takes the knight, we take this rook. So basically, rook e1 isn't even a threat. That's very good, because if there are no threats, we can think about our own threats. First of all, let's try to calculate bishop f4, because it's the move that is capturing the pawn. So why not to take it? Why not to take it? What's happening after bishop f4? After a bishop f4, I don't like rook h3 so much. We can still play something like queen d4. Yes, we did win the pawn. After rook f3, we are not losing the piece because at least we can play bishop a5 and defending this knight. But still, I don't like that we kind of give initiative to white. Let's say after bishop f4, rook h3, queen d4, white goes queen f3, then white brings this rook. Then it will attack the bishop and attack the knight and attack the f7 pawn just in the future. So bishop f4 is definitely the move you should calculate first, but I don't believe it's the best one. Let's try to calculate knight g4. What's happening after knight g4? Let's say rook h3 is not possible anymore because of knight f2 fork. So rook h3 is not an option. After knight g4, attacking the rook. So rook g2 is a bit suspicious because at least there is this check. Then knight comes to e3. No, very suspicious now. Not good. If after knight g4, rook e2, very tricky move, because after queen takes d3, there is this check. And if take and knight f2, this is great. That's why rook e2 is not possible. So white wanted to trick black, but they tricked themselves. That's why I believe after knight g4, rook e2 is a bad move. Once again, this line. Knight g4, if rook e2, attacking the queen. What do? We take this bishop. But white thought they would trick the opponent by playing rook e8, opening this line. But after rook e8, queen takes d3, and then knight f2 comes with the fork, attacking the king and attacking the queen. And this will be the white queen on d3. I really like knight g4 as the first move. Before going knight g4, let's try to calculate some other moves, because maybe there are some better options. That's why it's better to think about all the possibilities. Maybe they are not so good. Two more moves, which we mentioned in the very beginning, were knight e4 and knight h5. If knight e4, we are threatening knight g3. What's happening after knight e4? Well, if it's like a big threat, white can take on e4, queen e4, then play rook g2, and then bring this rook into the game. That's why I don't like knight e4 too much, because this knight can create many problems, so why to trade it? Let's think about knight h5. This is more appealing. Both moves are looking so good now, like knight g4 and knight h5, but there is only one solution. Knight g4, rook c2, we can take on f4, we can play queen g3. To be honest, it doesn't look good for white. So it's just a matter which move is a bit better. Let's try knight h5. It was correct! It was correct! Guys! Yes, intuition. Sometimes it's just about intuition. Because I didn't have explanation why knight g4 was not good. I think both of the moves were really good. Now, knight g3. If the king goes to g2 or h2, we take on f1. If the rook captures our queen, then we take this rook and we are piece up. Good job. So after knight g3, like the only move is rook g3, queen takes g3, we are taking this pawn, attacking that pawn. Looks really horrible for white. And this bishop. Look at this monster. Look at this monster. Look at this square. Queen h2. just in there. Mate in there, mate very close. Let's play knight g3. Looks very cool. How about this endgame? Rook endgames. What do we know about rook endgames? We know that white has 2 pawns more. This we know. But also in the rook endgames, it's very important the position of the king and the activity of the rooks. It's black to move, and we see that king on d4 is very active, and there are some ideas of mating. Many of you have already suggested f4, but is it actually a forced mate? This is a big question. And I believe this is not the forced mate, because if f4, white goes king f2. If black plays a rook h2, then king goes to e1. Then we give one more check, and then very important king d2. And if another rook gives the check, it's not the mate, because there is rook e2. White manages cover in time. King d3, good idea. f4, then king d3, then go this direction, then win one of the pawns. But I don't believe that this is what chess.com wants from us. Let's go back to our rule. Is there any other logical move but for f4? I don't see it. I simply don't see. If we start with rook h3 check, the king comes here. Okay, if the king comes here, we can at least repeat the moves. If a rook h3, the king goes there, then we can check. King e1, for example. Once again, if we give the check, the king goes here. If we give this check, the rook defends. So what we can do is, okay, the question if to do it with f4 or without f4. Let's make it with f4, it's more forcing. King f2, rook h2. King e1, we may take this pawn on b2. And after rook b2, there is a serious threat of the mate. Is there any defense? Check on e4, there is a check on d7. So what we have learned, there are 2 logical moves in this very position, this very starting position, and these moves are f4 and rook h3. Let's start calculating this line from the very beginning. f4, king f2, check, here. Take this pawn, threatening the mate. If the king goes here, then check, rook e1, then rook b1, winning this rook. This is cool for us. So let's go from the very beginning. f4, king f2, rook h2, king e1, here. If a rook e2, check, king f2 here, and winning the rook. Cool. So f4, king f2, rook h2, king e1 here. If a rook e4, I don't see how it helps, because the king goes to c3. There is no check on e3 because there is a pawn on f4, so we'll just take this rook. I don't think rook e4 helps. So once again, f4, king f2, rook h2, king e1, rook b2, and there is this check. Don't go king c5 because rook d5 will be the mate. But once again, we go here. There is no check on e3, there is no check on d3, so how will white defend? I don't see a way. Just comparing the lines, if we start with rook h3, white goes here, and if it's the same line, then after this, let's say rook d7, king c3, there will be this check. That's why I really want to push f4, because this pawn on f4 will control the e3 square, and I think it's important. Let's start with f4. I think it's correct. It is correct. Let's try to check. Yes, it's the line we calculate. And now I think let's take a little pause and once again calculate. What's happening after rook b2? King c5, this is not the mate because we can take it. But anyway, we don't go king c5 because rook b2, this. Rook d5 is still the best move. We trade the rooks. Then there is no checkmate on h1. That's why I prefer to take rook d7, king c3, renewing the threat of rook h1, and I just see how white can defend. Let's go. This, and now not here, because rook d5, yeah, sorry, it wasn't the mate once again, but it's the trade of the rook, and we need this rook, because we need to put this rook here. That's why we go to c3. What's going on here? Black is an exchange up. The threat may be playing something like queen f2, attacking the b2 pawn, or of course the simple one, queen takes f4. Why not to take this pawn if it's hanging? Well, let's try to calculate some of the lines. I don't like knight d5. The reason why I don't like knight d5, because after knight d5, e takes d5, queen d5, bishop c6, for example. And what to do? I don't know. Queen f6, queen f7, king b6, no checks more. So we sacrifice the knight, but I don't know how to proceed with the attack. So knight d5, I don't like so much. G7, queen g7, as I mentioned, I don't feel it makes much sense. f5. f5 is cool, but after f5, maybe even something simple like, okay, queen c7 I don't like because we will just take and f6. So queen c7 is bad, but after f5, what can black do? Maybe the same queen f2, knight d1. Looks like the only move. Queen d2 or queen e2. I don't like it so much. We have to go back. I don't like, but the move knight e4 I really like. The line goes knight e4. If black takes on e4, we take. This is the check. If king b8, we give this check. Nice. King c8 is the only move as this bishop is controlling the diagonal. So king e8 was not possible. Then we play bishop b7. King must go there. Bishop c6. King must go back. Queen b7. King must go there. And queen d7 comes with the mate. That's why I really like knight e4. Bishop a6 and queen b7 is one move first. Yes. When you see the mate, look for a better one. That's what I learned from the previous stream. But bishop c6 is also the mate and bishop a6 is the mate. It's right that after knight e4, d takes e4 is not forced. Moreover, d takes e4 leads to a forced mate for white. So d takes e4 is not the best move. Queen is under the attack. If the queen, let's say, takes this pawn, then I believe we go knight d6. The king, if the king goes to b8, there will be queen b6. So king a8 is a bit better, but still queen b6. I believe queen b6 is better. Queen b7 is threatening. Is there any good defense? I don't see any defense. So after knight e4, the move which may be the best for black is to play queen h2. We may quickly take a look at knight e4, rook takes b2. After king b2, the idea is to play king g2, so that after d takes e4, white will not be able to take with the bishop. I'll calculate it from the very beginning. Knight e4, rook b2, king b2. If it's a check now, I think we play queen c2. If after trading the queens, queen c2, bishop c2, black takes, then this pawn is running and it's unstoppable. Looks cool. So after knight e4, rook b2 seems not to work, but maybe queen h2 attacking the b2 pawn. Knight d6 looks logical. Let's try to calculate this line. Knight d6, king a8. Let's say we play king b6, threatening the mate, rook b2, king a1. Then the only way to avoid the mate is rook b1, but there are some ideas with perpetual check. I think it may be a draw. King b1 and then all these checks, queen g1, and it lasts forever. So what to do? Knight e4, queen h2. Maybe then we go knight d6, king a8 and queen c7. So if it's the same idea, rook b2, king a1, rook b1, queen b1, but now after this check, we have the defense. Queen c1, still it's not so clear, because after queen c1, black takes this pawn. Let's try to go from the elimination point of view. Do we have any other options instead of knight e4? Because maybe let's just make knight e4. Then ask our opponent. Maybe he doesn't see this queen h2 and we will win after d takes e4 or any other move. So do you have any other good possibility instead of knight e4? I don't think we have. I think we should try knight e4. Let's try knight e4. It was right. They ask what to do after queen f4. Well, after queen h2, I don't know what was happening. Maybe knight d6. I had an idea of playing g7, so that if after a rook g7, then the rook will not control the b2 square. Maybe that was the solution. Something like queen h2, knight d6, then g7, and something like this. But after queen f4, I think knight d6. Queen e7 may be the move, but queen e7, d takes e4, queen d7, then king b6, queen e6, king c7. It's a bit unclear. I prefer knight d6. So queen e7 or knight d6. Queen e7. What can black do? Queen c7 doesn't look good because I'll show it. Queen e7. Queen c7 doesn't look good because of knight c5. If king goes somewhere here, protecting this bishop, then g7 looks unpleasant for black, at least, if not totally hopeless for black. So after queen e7, I prefer d takes e4. Then queen d7, let's say king comes here, queen e6, king goes to c7 or to a7, and it's a bit unclear. Looks better for white, but is it winning? It's just the question which move is winning. Okay, let's calculate knight d6, king a8 the only move, then we go. I calculate this line. I don't see anything wrong with queen b6. I feel queen b6 is very important because if we go knight d6, king a8, queen c7, then after rook b2, king b2, queen d4 comes with a check. That's why I prefer queen b6, that this pawn is protected. And if black tries rook b2, king b2, this pawn is protected. There is no queen d4. And if queen d2, we play bishop c2. Looks good. Let's go with knight d6. Okay. After queen d6, I believe all of you know what to do. But king a8 was really challenging. I mean, I don't know why they didn't ask us what to do after king a8, because there was some difference between queen c7 or queen b7. Maybe queen c7 was also winning. That's why they preferred not to ask questions when two moves are winning. But okay, to ask what to do after knight d6, queen d6 is a bit funny. Let's just take it. So well done to all of you. Thanks for joining this stream. I really enjoyed calculating with you, and thank you so much for being active, for sending your lines, for your suggestions, for your good moves, for your solving 53 puzzles. So, see you next time. Thanks to all who joined today. See you all next time. Bye bye. Thank you so much.